morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar presentation on Ohio EPA's Drinking Water Treatment Material Beneficial Use Groundwater Systems General Permit. My name is Helen Miller with the Division of Environmental and Financial Assistance here at Ohio EPA, and I will be moderating this morning's presentation with Ohio EPA's Harry Sarvis and Megan Uvari. We're going to start today's webinar with a live poll. We'd really like to get a feel for who is out there today. So which one of these are you? Are you a public water system attending the webinar? Are you a contractor or distributor? Are you a farmer? Or are you the other category? And let's see what our categories are. Okay, so it looks like 68% of you are the public water systems out there, and we have 32% other. So that gives our presenters a better idea of who is out there today and what kind of questions we might be getting today. So again, please put your questions in the Q&A pane throughout the webinar. And thank you for participating in our poll. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Harry Sarvis.
Thank you, Helen. My name is Harry Sarvis, and I am the manager of Ohio EPA's Beneficial Use Program. On behalf of Ohio EPA, I would like to welcome you to this webinar on our recently issued general permit for the beneficial use of drinking water treatment material that is generated from a groundwater-sourced drinking water treatment plant. After my opening remarks, Megan Uvari of our Beneficial Use Group will present the rest of this webinar. Along with Megan, Mara Flynn and Phil Shirosky of my staff are here to help answer any questions you may have during this webinar. Now I would like to briefly go over our agenda for our webinar this morning. We will begin by giving a historical background to the beneficial use of drinking water treatment material in the state of Ohio. And when you hear me say drinking water treatment material, you may hear Megan and others refer to it as by the acronym DWTM. We're referring to the same thing. So again, we will be looking at the history of the beneficial use of drinking water treatment material by its placement on agricultural fields in the state of Ohio, as well as giving you some background on our recently issued beneficial use rules and how they interact with the land application of drinking water treatment material. Next, we will look at specific criteria that need to be met in order for the applicant to be able to obtain coverage under this general permit and thus be able to land apply their drinking water treatment material as a substitute for lime on farm fields. There are a number of criteria that need to be demonstrated, and Megan will cover each of those, but I do want to briefly highlight two of them. The first one is the need to determine that your drinking water treatment material is not a hazardous waste. While we believe that most, if not all, drinking water treatment material generated in the state of Ohio is not a hazardous waste, our rules require that that demonstration be made prior to the issuance of coverage under this general permit. So we will be showing you a very straightforward way to be able to make that demonstration. Secondly, another criteria that's important to obtain coverage under this general permit is the requirement to representatively sample and analyze your drinking water treatment material for specific constituents of concern, specifically certain metals that are typically found in drinking water treatment material. We will go over a couple of ways of sampling your drinking water treatment material, as well as how to analyze and demonstrate that your drinking water treatment material meets the constituent of concern levels that are spelled out in the general permit. Next, we will cover specific conditions that are in the permit that are associated with the land application of the drinking water treatment material on agricultural fields. There are specific conditions that are tied to the actual placement of the drinking water treatment material on agricultural fields as a replacement for lime. The majority of these conditions relate to the need to protect the waters of the state. This would be rivers and streams, ponds, as well as wells and other sources of water that are used for drinking water. And we will discuss those during this presentation. The general permit also allows for the temporary storage of drinking water treatment material at the site where it will be land applied. And there are specific conditions associated with that temporary storage that we will discuss. And then finally, the general permit requires certain records be kept and maintained by the permittee during the life of this general permit, which is 5 years. And we will briefly highlight those requirements as well. And finally, we will discuss what needs to be included in a complete application package that you as the applicant would need to submit in order to obtain coverage. This would include, for example, a notice of intent for coverage form. We refer to that as an NOI form. We'll talk about the need for a sampling and analysis plan, your analytical results. We'll talk briefly about the need for to do a statistical analysis of your results from your sampling, as well as the need to have a liming license from the Ohio Department of Agriculture. Once we are done with this presentation, as Helen had mentioned earlier, we will have time to answer some of or all of the questions that you have submitted during the presentation. As Helen has mentioned, if we do not have time to answer all of the questions that are submitted, we will respond to you by email after the webinar. So with that, I now turn the presentation over to Megan.
All right, so we are going to get started with another quick poll question. And that poll question is, do you currently have a DWTM general permit? Yes or no?
All right, that looks like just about everybody. So I'm going to close the poll and share the results. Back to you, Megan.
Thanks, Dan. So it looks like 20% already do have a current DWTM general permit and 80% do not. All right, so beneficial use. Beneficial use involves the substitution of secondary materials for some or all virgin or raw materials in a natural or commercial product. It provides a functional benefit and meets product specifications. It does not constitute disposal. It does not cause pollution of any waters of the state, and it does not pose concerns to human health or the environment. History of DWTM beneficial use. Beneficial use of drinking water treatment material was previously under the Division of Surface Water. The approval was through a sludge management plan or a land application management plan. Not all public water systems had an authorization for land application. So why beneficial use rules and why now? In 2017, Ohio EPA issued rules for the beneficial use of certain waste materials, including DWTM. There were a number of reasons for developing and issuing these rules. There has been a desire to legitimize beneficial use and remove the stigma of waste. We also wanted to streamline the process for authorization and create a clearer and more consistent program. Lastly, Ohio EPA wanted to promote a legitimate beneficial use resulting in diversion of materials from landfills and preservation of raw materials. Overview of beneficial use authorizations. Our rules allow for the beneficial use of 4 waste materials: DWTM, boundary sand, sewage sludge incinerator ash, and Lake Erie dredge, through the following authorizations: general permit, individual permit, and authorization by rule. General permits are created for common uses of high volume, low toxicity materials like drinking water treatment material, iron and aluminum foundry sands, sewage sludge incinerator ash, and Lake Erie dredge. Qualifying criteria, permit conditions, and uses for the materials are predefined in the general permits and cannot be customized or altered. Individual permits are available for these same 4 waste materials if the applicant desires permit conditions that are different from the general permit. Permittees can submit an individual permit application and request alternative beneficial uses for these materials. DMWIM will work with the applicant to create a site-specific permit that works for them. The beneficial use rules do not specify analytical standards or usage limits. All requirements are included in the permit as opposed to being in the rules. Each permit contains constituent limits, such as US EPA regional screening levels or US EPA 503 pollutant concentrations and leaching limits. Most beneficial use permits are issued for 5 years and can be renewed. Authorizations approved by rule are for wastes that are encapsulated into a product such as concrete or brick and do not require a permit. So who's the permittee? In general, the permittee is the individual that applies for coverage under the general permit by submitting a notice of intent or NOI. This can be the generator or a public water system, a distributor such as a contractor or hauler, or the end user, which could be the farmer, anyone who's land applying. So we are going to go ahead and do another quick poll question here. And that poll question is going to be, when applying for the DWTM general permit, who can be the permittee? The generator or water treatment plant, the distributor, contractor or hauler, or the end user, a farmer, or D, any of the above?
All right, that looks like about it. So I'm going to close the poll and share the results. Back to you, Megan.
Thanks, Dan. So it looks like 15% selected the generator or water treatment plant and 85% selected any of the above. So the answer is actually any of the above. Like we just discussed, anyone in the process from the generator to the end user can apply and hold the general permit for land application. What if I don't want to use my DWTM as a liming material under this general permit? This general permit is not mandatory. This permit is only for those who want to beneficially use DWTM as a liming material on agricultural fields. If you do not want to beneficially use DWTM, you can dispose of it at a landfill. DWTM can also be incorporated into concrete or other construction materials as identified in our beneficial use rules, specifically in OAC Rule 3745-599-10. If your DWTM does not meet the eligibility requirements of this general permit, or if you want to use the DWTM in a different manner, such as an ingredient in a soil blend or structural fill, you can apply for an individual beneficial use permit. The application for an individual permit can be found on the beneficial use webpage. Please note that key hyperlinks to these elements were provided in the webinar announcement you received last month, and they're also on our website. Beneficial use individual permit. For materials and uses that we're not as familiar with, you can apply for an individual permit using one of the same 4 materials that we have general permits for: drinking water treatment material, spent foundry sand, dredge, or sewage sludge incinerator ash. An individual permit allows for the uses and constituent levels to be tailored to your specific use or site. The applicant must submit an application for a beneficial use individual permit and a $350 application fee. Ohio EPA will review the application and work with the applicant when drafting the conditions in the permit, such as the compliance demonstration, best management practices, and record keeping and reporting conditions. What if I do want to use my DWTM as a liming material under this permit? If you want to use DWTM as a liming material under this permit and you have an expired DWTM general permit, you will need to apply for coverage under the general permit. If you apply for coverage, you will be able to operate under this general permit immediately while we review your application. If you have a valid lamp permit or individual use permit, once it expires, you will need to apply for coverage under the general permit. If you have an expired lamp permit or a sludge management plan, you will need to apply for coverage under the general permit now. If you do not have any previous permits, you will also need to apply for coverage under the general permit. DWTM general permit eligibility criteria. Significant criteria that determine eligibility for coverage under the general permit. The DWTM must be from a groundwater sourced water treatment plant. The DWTM cannot be a hazardous waste, and the DWTM cannot exceed any of the metal concentration limits specified in Table 1 of the general permit. We will be covering these in more detail throughout the presentation. Hazardous waste determination. The beneficial use rules exclude the use of hazardous waste. Therefore, a determination needs to be made that the DWTM is not a hazardous waste. There are a couple of ways to make this determination, which are explained in our guidance document. We recommend that the public water systems use generator knowledge to demonstrate that the DWTM is not a hazardous waste. This can be accomplished by identifying which materials and chemicals are used in the drinking water treatment process. If there isn't a substantial change in the treatment process as defined in the drinking water regulations, you will not be required to make this demonstration again, even if you apply for the next generation of this general permit 5 years from now. How do I sample? When sampling for total metals analysis, you may representatively sample the DWTM as it is generated before it is discharged into the DWTM containment area. This method of collecting samples is highly recommended, as it will save time and effort compared with representatively sampling DWTM that is in a lagoon or containment area. To collect samples of DWTM as it is generated, you will need to collect enough volume of DWTM so that there are 100 grams of solid DWTM material available for the total metals analysis. You can collect 1 or 2 samples per week for 1 month until you have 4 to 8 samples to analyze for total metals. If you decide that you want to representatively sample DWTM in your lagoons, we have provided hypothetical examples of how to do so in the DWTM guidance document located on our website. In these examples, we highlight how to grid a lagoon and identify each section and take at least 1 sample per section. Please note that you may want to take more than 1 sample per section in the event that you need additional analytical data. If you would like us to review and provide input on your sampling plan prior to sampling and submitting your notice of intent, please email or call the beneficial use group and we will provide technical assistance. How do I analyze for metals? In order to be eligible for coverage under this general permit, you will need to analyze the samples of DWTM you've obtained from your lagoon for the metals listed in Table 1, shown here by demonstrating the 95% upper confidence limit for each constituent listed on the table, and ensure that the 95% UCL does not exceed the constituent concentration limits specified in Table 1. These standards came from several different regulatory programs, such as US EPA regional screening levels and US EPA 503 limits for land application of biosolids, and from interested party input received when we were drafting the beneficial use rules. As with the hazardous waste determination, If your water treatment process does not significantly change, this will be a one-time analysis for these metals. "95% UCL guidance document." We have a 95% UCL guidance document on our beneficial use webpage that offers more information on how to calculate the 95% UCL. For most beneficial use permits, the permittee is required to determine that the 95% UCL of the mean for each constituent in the beneficial use byproduct does not exceed its constituent concentration limit specified in the permit. DIMWM highly recommends using ProUCL to calculate the 95% UCL. ProUCL requires no formal background in statistics, but some statistical training is helpful to understand the assumptions and input requirements for the statistical tests used in decision making. Input data sets are straightforward, requiring columns of detect values for contaminants and whether each value is a detect or non-detect at the quantitation limit. Desired statistical tests can be selected from drop-down menus and relevant options from subsequent menus. If the applicant types their data into a spreadsheet for us, we can also run the result through ProUCL for you. Why these concentration limits? These concentration limits used in the general permit come from the US EPA RSLs. US EPA RSLs are risk-based standards that are protective for residential situations and therefore are acceptable levels for agricultural settings. We also use US EPA 503 levels for metals within biosolids. Because the 503 levels are considered to be protective for land application on farm fields, we believe that these levels would be protective for the land application of DWTM onto farm fields. Additionally, using these standards, most, if not all, public water systems should be able to meet these concentration levels. So we're going to go ahead and take another quick poll question. The poll question is going to be true or false. In order to be eligible for the DWTM groundwater general permit, you need to sample your DWTM for microcystins.
All right, that looks like about it. So I am going to close the poll and share the results, and back to you, Megan.
Thanks, Dan. So it looks like 24% selected true and 76% selected false. So the answer is false. You do not need to sample your DWTM for microcystins to be eligible for the DWTM groundwater general permit, as you are not required as part of your compliance sampling to sample for microcystins. Therefore, we do not expect to find microcystins in your water. DWTM land application conditions. The general permit identifies several conditions associated with the land application of DWTM. These are considered best management practices and were adopted to be consistent with other land application authorizations. A number of these conditions address setback provisions. For example, DWTM cannot be applied within 300 feet of wells and surface waters used for drinking water. Other conditions address when DWTM can be land applied. For example, DWTM cannot be land applied during a precipitation event, on saturated soil, or when the ground is frozen or snow covered. Temporary storage. The general permit allows for the temporary storage of dewatered DWTM at the site where it will be land applied. There are additional operational conditions for storage which are included in the general permit. For example, DWTM cannot be stored within 300 feet of an occupied building unless approved in writing by the landowner, and, if applicable, the resident of the occupied building. Any other storage types, such as storing wet DWTM or storage for longer than 180 days, or a regional storage site, will require additional permitting through our Division of Surface Water. Record keeping. The general permit requires the permittee to retain certain records identified in the general permit for up to 5 years. These records deal with specific operating conditions spelled out in the general permit. For example, the location of where the DWTM is stored, blended, or placed on the land, approval from the landowner and resident for DWTM storage within 300 feet of an occupied building, and a copy of your liming license issued by the Ohio Department of Agriculture. While these records do not need to be submitted to Ohio EPA, they need to be made available upon request. We will request and review your records on a periodic basis to maintain compliance. In addition, the permittee will need to submit an annual report by April 1st, indicating the amount of DWTM used for the previous year. Please note that you will need to submit an annual report even if you do not use any DWTM under the general permit during the previous year. Annual report form. We've recently developed an annual report form that we recommend that permittees use when preparing and submitting their annual report each year. The form is located on our beneficial use webpage. In the near future, we hope to allow for permittees to electronically submit their annual reports. Application package. In order to obtain coverage under this general permit, you will need to submit a notice of intent application. This application will need to include the following: a completed notice of intent form, documents demonstrating that the DWTM is not a hazardous waste, a copy of your DWTM sampling plan, all laboratory results from the DWTM sampling, statistical analysis for metals evaluation, a copy of the liming license from the Ohio Department of Agriculture, and an application fee of $200. Notice of intent form. So this is what the notice of intent form looks like. You can find it via our website by going to epa.ohio.gov. And once there, you'll navigate to the Division of Materials and Waste Management webpage. And then once there, you'll navigate to the Beneficial Use webpage. You can scroll down to the Permits and Guidance Documents tab, and you'll find the Notice of Intent form. While here, you can also view the DWTM Groundwater Systems General Permit and the related guidance documents. ODA Liming License. So here's a picture of what the ODA Liming License application that you'll need to fill out and submit if you do not yet have your liming license. The licensing period is from January 1st to December 31st, and you can find this form and related information on the Ohio Department of Agriculture's Division of Plant Health in their fertilizer program. And if you do have any issues finding this form or submitting the application, let us know and we can go ahead and help you out with that too. So we're going to go ahead and do another poll question here. This poll question is: the application package should include what? A completed NOI form, sampling plan, copy of the liming license from ODA, or all of the above?
All right, I'm not seeing any more votes coming in, so I'm going to close the poll and share the results. And back to you, Megan.
Thanks, Dan. So great. It looks like everyone selected all of the above, which is the correct answer. So when submitting your NOI application, you'll need to be sure that you include your completed NOI form, your sampling plan and analytical data, a copy of your liming license from ODA, and your check for the application fee of $200. Here's our contact information and web address for the beneficial use webpage. So if you need any assistance in developing your sampling plan or completing your application, please contact any one of the folks listed on this slide, and we will be more than willing to help you with any part of the application. And here is some additional contact information for other Ohio EPA subject matter experts. Colin White is an environmental manager for the emerging contaminant section in the Division of Drinking and Groundwaters. And Aaron Shear is an environmental manager in the Division of Surface Water and works with best management practices. And we are going to do one remaining poll question. See, this poll question is, do you think pineapple belongs on pizza? And while you're answering this, if you do have any final questions or comments, you can go ahead and submit those in the chat box. So we'll take a second for that while answering this question.
Okay, looks like we have some strong opinions here. I don't know if it's the right answer or not. It looks like that's a couple more coming in. All right, so I'm going to close the poll and share the results. And back to you, Megan.
Thank you, Dan. So it looks like 52% do agree that pineapple belongs on pizza. That's my preference. I would eat pizza with just pineapple on it if I could. And for those that haven't tried it, I would recommend that you do. For those that said no way, why not give it another chance? All right, so with our remaining time here, we are going to see if we have any additional questions and comments and go ahead and try to answer a few of those questions.
Thank you, Harry and Megan. We're now going to begin answering the questions submitted. And just to remind you, you can continue submitting as we're going through these. We'll do our best to answer them. Again, if we don't get to them, we'll reach out to you via email following the webinar. So our first question is, how do I know if my sampling and analysis plan is acceptable? I don't want to sample, submit my application, and then find out my plan isn't correct. Meryl, would you like to tackle that one?
Sure, Helen. We recommend that prior to collecting samples or finalizing your sampling and analysis plan, that you contact Megan, Phil, or I in the beneficial use group so that we can review the plan and make sure it is appropriate for your public water system. And if you want, we can also come out to your site and assist you with developing the sampling plan and helping you to take the samples.
Okay, thank you, Meryl. Our next question is, does the permit holder need to have a liming license? Typically, our contractor holds the license. Harry, would you like to take this one?
Yes, Helen, I will. And I appreciate this question. This is a question that we have received in previous presentations and interactions with potential applicants. For purposes of eligibility for this general permit, there needs to be a liming license for the drinking water treatment material that is going to be land applied from the Ohio Department of Agriculture. Whether the public water system applies for that liming license or their contractor or hauler applies for that liming license, it does not really matter to us. What we need is a demonstration that a liming license for that particular drinking water treatment material, that the applicant is pursuing coverage under this general permit. Our experience has been that in many cases it is the hauler or the contractor who obtains the liming license and maintains it. We have seen public water systems obtain that liming license. In some cases, that is because they may have multiple haulers who land apply their drinking water treatment material, or they perhaps put out their contract for bid every year to see for a particular hauler and land applicator. But for purposes of this general permit, it does not matter who obtains the liming license from the Ohio Department of Agriculture. It's just that that needs to have been obtained and submitted in your application package.
Okay, thank you, Harry. Where can I send my samples for analysis? Do I have to use a certified lab for the analysis? Mara, would you like to take that one?
Yes, I will answer that. There are numerous labs in Ohio that can analyze your drinking water treatment material samples for metals. And these labs do not need to be certified by Ohio EPA. And if you ask someone in the beneficial use group, we can help you find a lab in your area that routinely analyzes soil or sediment samples for total metals.
Okay. Next question is, do I, as the public water system, need to get coverage under the general permit, or could I have my contractor get the coverage? And Harry, would you like to take that one?
Sure, Helen. Again, I want to thank the person who submitted this question in, because this is a very common but very important question that we receive regarding not just this particular general permit, but any general permit that we have issued in the beneficial use program. As was indicated in the presentation, we developed the beneficial use rules so that any person ultimately could seek coverage under a general permit. The generator of the waste material, in this case, the public water system who generates the drinking water treatment material, can apply for coverage under the general permit. The distributor or contractor, which in this case could be the hauler or the land applicator, could also apply for coverage under this general permit in lieu of the public water system. And finally, it is possible for the actual end user, in this case, the farmer, to apply for coverage under the general permit. Our experience has been with the first general permit that we issued back in 2018, which expired in 2020, which we are now renewing with this general permit, which will be for 5 years, by the way. Our experience has been that, generally speaking, it has been the public water system who has applied for coverage. And for a number of reasons. Again, they may have multiple haulers who land apply. They may have farmers who come and just take the drinking water treatment material from their water treatment plant and land apply it. Or they may have a requirement to put up the bid for the removal and land application of the drinking water treatment material to contractors on a yearly or every other year basis. And so it would make sense for them, from their perspective, to have the general permit in place for 5 years so that it would not be dependent upon a contractor having to come in and get a general permit. But regardless, any one of those three, the public water system, the hauler or land applier, or the farmer, could conceivably apply for coverage. And as long as the public water system or the contractor land applies, they both don't need to apply for coverage. One would suffice.
Okay, another question came in. If I, the public water system, am the permit holder, but not the land applicator, we have a contractor do the land application, what exactly am I responsible for? And Megan, would you like to take that one?
Yep, I can do that, Helen. So if the permit holder is not the land applicator, they're still going to be responsible for ensuring compliance of the conditions in the permit. The permittee is responsible for all the setback provisions for temporary storage and land application. So if the public water system is the permittee but has a contractor who is land applying the material, they should make sure that the contractor is aware of the setback conditions. And we recommend, sharing the general permit with your contractor so they're familiar with the general permit and with the conditions in the permit. And then lastly, if the permittee is also, the permittee is also going to be responsible for providing Ohio EPA with any requested records. So that's just something else to note if you are kind of, hiring a contractor to do the land application, that they provide you those records too.
Okay, great. Another question is, who needs to conduct the sampling and analysis of my drinking water treatment material? The public water system, the contractor we hire to land apply the DWTM, or the consultant? Mara, would you like to take that one?
Sure, Helen. The drinking water treatment material sampling can be conducted by the public water system, the land applier, or an environmental consultant. In the past, we've had the land applier, environmental consultant, or the public water system conduct the sampling and analysis and submit the application. But I would say the majority of our permit applications have been submitted by the public water system.
Okay. Next question is, what are my options if I have DWTM that exceeds a limit in the general permit? Mara, how about that one?
Sure. Now, depending on what the exceedance is, we can work with you and help you apply for an individual permit to beneficially use your drinking water treatment material, or you may need to analyze additional samples if the statistical analysis is the issue. But the beneficial use group can help you determine additional best management practices to address the exceedance, because maybe it will be that we increase the setbacks for whatever the exceedance is. But whatever it is, we can work with you.
Okay. Next question is, once I submit my application, how long will it take Ohio EPA to review it and grant me coverage under the general permit? Harry, would you like to take that one?
Sure, Helen. Again, this is, I'm sure, a question that is very relevant to potential applicants because they want to obviously obtain their coverage letter as quickly as possible. The short answer is that once we receive a complete application package, which would include the notice of intent form, the sampling and analysis plan that you developed and used, the analytical data, and the statistical analysis of that data, as well as your liming license from the Ohio Department of Agriculture and the application fee, it will generally take my staff about 2 weeks at the outside to review all that information and begin to draft and prepare the notice of coverage letter that will grant the applicant coverage under the general permit. That needs to be reviewed by our management and then signed by our management before it can be issued. So generally, our time frame that we shoot for is between 3 to 4 weeks upon receipt of a completed application package. Now, I want to emphasize the fact that the importance of having a complete application package. That is why we emphasize that if you need any assistance on putting together your sampling and analysis plan, my staff can work with you up front on the development of that. We are willing to receive a draft of that, to do a quick review to let you know that, yes, this is complete and this will address what we need. So anywhere along the process, if you need our assistance, please contact us, because once we get that completed application, we can have a very quick turnaround time. It's when we receive an application package that has issues with it where it's not complete, where that can slow down the process of getting the coverage letter issued to the applicant.
Okay, another question came in. Who needs to maintain all of the required records? The generator, the land applier, or the landowner? And Megan, I think you were speaking to records a little bit ago, so you can tackle that one.
Yep, Helen, I can go ahead and answer that. So like I was talking about in the previous question that I answered, the permittee is going to need to maintain all records that we require in the general permit, whether the records that the generator, has to create, with the sampling and analysis, or the land applicator or the landowner. If the public water system is using a contractor, they can have the contractor maintain all the records for the public water system. The permittee is ultimately responsible for making the records available on request. And the same goes, if there's a contractor that is the permittee and holding the general permit, you'll need to make sure that you also have the records needed, sampling and analysis from the water treatment plant. Depends on who's holding the ODA liming license. You will be responsible for collecting and keeping all the records and necessary paperwork that we require. But yes, so in general, the permittee needs to maintain the records and keep those in order for us when we might request them.
Okay, thank you. Okay, another question is, there are specific conditions associated with land application of the drinking water treatment material, like it can't be placed within 33 feet of the waters of the state. Why are these conditions included, and where did they come from? Where did they originate? Harry, would you like to take that one?
Yes, Helen. Again, a very good question. Generally speaking, the operating conditions that we have for the land application, the use of your drinking water treatment material as a substitute for lime onto agricultural fields, are there to provide a level of protection against any negative impacts to what we call waters of the state. This would be rivers and streams and other bodies of water. That's why we have the setback of like 33 feet from a stream or a body of water. We also have, I believe in this one, the setback of 300 feet from wells or surface waters that are used for drinking water purposes. Now, where do these specific numbers come from? Generally speaking, most of these numbers come from the Ohio EPA's biosolids program and their rules. While we recognize that drinking water treatment material is not the same as biosolids, and in fact, there are a lot more conditions on the biosolids in their rules than we have in this general permit, we identified certain of these setback provisions, particularly from waters of the state, and we believe that these would be helpful and necessary to just to protect that valuable resource. The 300-foot setback from, bodies of water or wells that are used, public wells that are used for drinking water, is from our source water protection program. And that program is in place to really make sure that our drinking water resources stay pure and clean. And so they requested that we have that requirement included in this. But so that's the background on where those came from.
Okay, thank you. And we have a lot of questions that we were not able to get to. And again, thank you for sending those in. and someone will reach out to you after the webinar and answer those questions for you. With that, I'd like to wrap up. Thank you, Harry and Megan, for your great presentations. Please check out our upcoming webinars. On July 20th, join us to learn about the variety of projects that can be funded through Ohio's Water Pollution Control Loan Fund. We'll highlight special items of interest such as principal forgiveness funding and loans for stormwater projects. Lastly, join us the morning of July 29th to learn about the risk management program requirements for drinking water and wastewater treatment plant superintendents and operators. CEUs are available for these webinars. And also, if you missed past webinars or would like to register for these webinars and other upcoming webinars, check out our training tab at epa.ohio.gov/DFA. You can also go to our training tab to subscribe to email notifications of future webinars. And with that, we'll end today's webinar. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great day.